Today's topic might sound a bit like it belongs in a legal textbook, but trust me, it's something that touches everyone working with geographic data. Whether you're making maps, analyzing trends, or sharing data sets with the world, we're talking about open data licensing, how it works, why it matters, and what can go wrong when it's overlooked. To help us unpack this essential but often misunderstood topic, I'm joined by Paul Heersink, the Program Manager of Roads and Addresses here at Esri Canada. Whether you're a seasoned GIS pro or just data curious, you won't want to miss this conversation. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Geographical Thinking. I'm Michelle Brake, and I'll be your guide as we explore ideas, stories, and conversations through the lens of geography. Joining me today is Paul Heersink, and welcome to Geographical Thinking, Paul. Can you give us some insight into your background and how have you gotten to where you are today?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michelle, and thanks for having me on the podcast. I've been working in the field of mapping and GIS for about 30 years. The only way I can remember is about the same age as my daughter. I graduated from Fleming College, same year that she was born. I got a diploma in cartography, worked in mapping in both the public and the private sectors, first with the provincial government with Ontario, and then over to the private sector and eventually with Esri Canada. And I've been with Esri Canada for the last 14 years. 12 of those years, I've been in the role of program manager for the Community Maps program. And the last two, new job for me, the last two, as a program manager for Roads and Addresses. And this is where here I am today.
Okay, so a good legacy of time there to really be an expert in data, in licenses, maybe.
I
So,
hope so.
hey, we'll see where it goes throughout the episode. I'm trusting you to take us on this path and guide all of our listeners along to maybe get a little bit more information about what happens with licensing when it comes to open data. But to get us started, can you tell us about your role at Esri Canada and how does it intersect with the topics of open data licensing?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm the program manager for the Roads and Addresses program, and I have a team of, me and one staff, basically working on improving addresses and roads for our customers across the country. So we work closely with the Community Maps team, and through the Community Maps program, we've received probably over 400 different data contributions from all levels of government, federal, provincial, municipal, also non-governmental organizations such as universities, First Nations, parks, and so on. And of course, they provide us all that data, and they provide that to us through either a signed agreement or an open data license. And in the open data license, it stipulates how we can or cannot use the data. So throughout the years, in my role as program manager of Roads and Addresses, and also as program manager of Community Maps program, I've taken a look at a lot of different data licenses, and I've seen a lot of them come in, and some of them are incomplete, some of them unclear, some of them are not well written. So I do have a lot of experience seeing what's inside those licenses.
Okay, and that's a fair amount of information to dive into, but at a high level, why is it essential for data providers to include a clear license when publishing geographic data?
Open data is equal, right? So people, an organization can create a open data site. They can put their data up there, but they also need to have some sort of stipulation on how that data can or cannot be used. Some providers are very particular. They don't want their data used in commercial products, for instance, or some of them are okay with however the data is used, but they want some recognition, some attribution that the data is coming from them. And other data providers, it doesn't matter so much. But it is important for the user, and of course, as Community Maps and Roads and Addresses, we are data users. It is important for us users to know exactly what we can and can't do with that. A confusing license just causes a lot of problems for everybody involved.
Okay, and that makes sense. Providing some guidelines to how I should use my data, where it should go, makes sense from both a user point of view and from people putting out their data there. You don't want to get it used in the wrong way. It reminds me very similarly of like Creative Commons and things when we think of art, but I think we might touch into some of those crossovers in a bit. I'm wondering, are there times when disclaimers and licenses get confused? Can you walk us through maybe a real world example when that confusion caused problems for either the data provider or the user?
Yeah, I think definitely a lot of data providers who put up an open data license are, in fact, just putting up a disclaimer. So they're very interested, of course, protecting themselves and any from any legal implications that might result from people using the data. So they generally put something up like, this data is provided as is. There's no guarantee for the quality. If you're relying on this data for business purposes, don't do that. Don't come after us. If there are problems with the data, we're not responsible for it. We're just providing it as is. But just saying, we're providing it as is isn't really a data user license, right? It doesn't specify how you can and can't use the data. Can you use it for commercial purposes? Can you use, or are you allowed to just use it internally? All those that disclaimer applies in both cases, but it still doesn't clarify how that data can be used by the user. So it's really and I've seen a lot, and most of the open data licenses that I've seen do seem to be disclaimers where they're not clear on how you can use the data. And because of that, because there's no clarity on the data user license in the role of community maps or roads and addresses, it's not something that we can use and incorporate into our data without knowing for certain that, yes, it's okay what we're going to be doing with the data. According to the user, it's okay that we can do this or not. So that clarity really is important for us to be able to make use of that data.
Gotcha. And then going deeper into that licensing side of things, now that we've got disclaimer versus license a little more clear, could you elaborate on the advantages of using standard open data licenses like the Creative Commons Zero or Creative Commons By, or even the Open Governmental license when creating a custom license?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to know that there are a number of standard open data licenses out there, and they're not all the same. They vary on what you can and can't do with it. CC0, for instance, basically it's wide open. You can take the data if somebody posts it as a CC0 license. You can take the data, you can use it in commercial items, you can use it for your own purposes, internal use. However, you can modify the data, you can reshare the data if you want. There's no restrictions on that. Other data licenses are sort of a little more restrictive. There's some that require, there's some that say, well, you can do anything you want with it. Just give us attribution or just give us credit. Say, hey, I'm publishing this data or I'm making a map using this data and it's coming from this provider. Just having a little note on the map sort of thing. Other licenses can be a little bit more restrictive. Sometimes data providers don't want their data used in a commercial setting. So you might be able to use it for your own purposes, for your own internal needs. You might be able to provide products that you're not necessarily making money on. So maybe if you're working for a nonprofit organization, for instance, you want to build a map using this data, you could do that. But if you're a commercial entity looking to generate revenue from this product, sometimes those licenses don't allow that sort of thing. I do have a blog post that sort of outlines the different licenses. I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about each one individually. Much better to actually look at it and to click on the different links and see what the licenses can do. But I think what's important, even before you go into deciding what license you want to use, you have to decide as an organization how you want to share that data, right? Do you want to make it completely open? Do you want to have some sort of credit provided by the users who are using that data? Or do you not want to have people use it for commercial purposes? So all those questions need to be answered before you can actually settle on an open data license that's suitable for your needs.
Gotcha. Which I think always comes into play, that governance practices and things, the technology side of it, that's fairly easy in the end. Dealing with the people and getting everyone to agree, that's really the tough part. So, Paul, it sounds like you're doing some tough work out there.
Yeah, it's. I wouldn't say it's tough. I mean, you do. I mean, from my experience, because I've seen a lot of licenses, you can quickly determine if a license is suitable for your purposes or not. The custom licenses, I would suggest not to use custom license. If I would take a look at the standard open data licenses that you referred to earlier to see if any of those data licenses meet your requirements as a data provider. When you get into custom licenses, then you have to hire a lawyer to complete that custom license, and then a lot of times you'll have some specialty language in there that might be filled with legalese and makes it a little more harder to decipher and determine how you can or cannot use that data. And most of the, I would say, most of the standard open data licenses that I've linked to in the blog post, they do cover probably 99% of the eventualities that anybody will come across in terms of data user licenses. So, you don't really need a lawyer for this. I mean, lawyers are probably going to shoot me for this. But again, I'm not a lawyer, but for the most part, if you're clear on how you want users to use the data, the standard open data licenses generally cover all that off. So if you're clear on that, then you're okay. You can pick one of these licenses, and you should be fine. You shouldn't be having any trouble, whatever. But if you want, get a lawyer to look at it and stuff. But again, there's always a cost involved with that, and I always find that when you get lawyers involved, there's usually some more time involved as well to get things done.
Fair point. And I'm wondering, have you come across any cases where a custom license has been necessary, or is this something that we're just talking in theoretical?
I mean, I've come across some custom licenses, whether or not they're really needed. Whether they're not, they couldn't be covered by a standard open data license. I guess it's up for debate. I think, again, I don't think there was a case that said, okay, this really cries out for a custom license, because most of the times we're dealing with the same sort of things, right? We're dealing with data. We're dealing with data ownership. We're dealing with how that data is being used, and there's some variation, but pretty much everything falls into one of the categories that we're looking at here.
Gotcha. Now, on to everything else that you do in the world of open data. I'm wondering, as the chairperson of Overture Map Foundation's Addressing Task Force, you've worked with over 400 million address records from 33 countries. That sounds like a lot to me, starting off. I'm wondering, what licensing challenges have you encountered in integrating such diverse data sets?
Well, sorry to disappoint you, but I did not personally review all 400
Ugh,
million addresses. But we have gone through a number of different data sources. And as you mentioned, we've got 33 different countries. Most of them are data coming on a national scale level. So a country provides a national address database for their area of interest. In some cases, we've had to delve into subnational levels. So in Canada, for instance, provincial data or territorial data. In the US, data coming from the states, or even down to the city level, county level. I mean, some of the counties in the US, for instance, have a fairly big population. So they do provide a sizable number of addresses. So, yeah, I mean, challenges. Again, it's of course, some of these countries, a lot of these countries don't speak English. So the open data license that you're looking at is going to be needs to be interpreted. I mean, Google Translate does a fairly good job, but if you want to be safe, you probably need to get a proper translator, and maybe, I don't know, I mean, what the risk is, but sometimes you might need to get a lawyer involved on that. And then of course, different languages have different ways of expressing things. So there's a couple of cases where we've had to sort of really dig in deep into a data license. I think there was one from South Korea that we weren't exactly sure what it meant. So we had to get a native Korean speaker to take a look at that and give us their 2 cents on how that should be interpreted. Um, yeah, and it runs the gamut of licenses. Some of them, some of the data providers provide really good licenses or follow one of the standard open data licenses. A lot of times I see a license that says, request permission to use, and that's the only thing that it says. So, and then you have to go to the data provider and ask them for permission to use that. And of course, having something like that, I mean, I can sort of understand maybe why a data provider would do that. But it does slow down the process of data adoption, right? And it might throw some people off, right? If they're looking for like, well, I need some roads data for this particular area. Oh, this county has open data site. Oh, it says request permission to use. If I need it right away, I probably won't be requesting permission to use it. I might be, looking to use a different source or something. So if a data provider is looking for users to adopt their data and their daily use, then it's in their interest to make to have a data license that is clear, easy to read, and easy to understand.
Makes sense to me. Now, again, going further into that work with Overture Maps, and how does that work within our roles here at Esri Canada? How have you found licensing restrictions to impact the inclusion of data in projects like Overture Maps or the Community Map of Canada?
Oh, I mean, it has a huge impact. I mean, we have to be very careful of the data that we use because, again, there's a lot of people that publish their data to an open data site. And publishing it to an open data site doesn't necessarily mean that it's open. In some cases, you might have conflicting licenses on the open data site. So you might have a data license that is sort of at the front page of the open data site that says this is how the data should be used, all the data that's on this open data site. And then they might have a specific license for a particular data layer. So then the question is like, well, if those two licenses are different, then which one applies to what? So there's some confusion with that. Um, but we have run into issues where people have published data to their open data site, and we're thinking, oh, this is great, we can use this. And we've gotten into trouble with that. And it's not something that we like to do. We don't like to get into trouble, and we'd like to do things properly, right? So for us as a data user with Esri Canada and also with Overture, we take a close look at those open data licenses. And if they're not clear, we're not going to be using that data.
Gotcha. Now I'm really calling into question all of the open data sites I've ever visited. Like, did I read the disclaimer? Is it a disclaimer? Is it a license? How have I used this data? Existential crisis, Paul. Thank you for that wonderful gift
Well,
today.
it's interesting because I was at a Overture Maps meeting a few weeks back, and we were talking about open data licenses, and I did put up one of those disclaimers, and I basically asked the audience, so is this a data license that you think is acceptable for us to use? And about a third said yes, and about two-thirds said no. So there's a lot of variety and perspectives on what you can and can't do with this, right? So
Okay, so it sounds like we all have to go read the blog post that you put out that we'll include in our notes to make sure we've got it clear of what's what, how do we these fall.
yeah, and it's it can be confusing because there are a number of standard open data licenses out there, but it doesn't need to be confusing. Again, I think I've tried to clarify that in my blog post. I made up a little chart that says, if you have this license, then you can do this. If you have this license, you can do this. So it can be confusing initially, but once you sort of get your head around on how the data licenses work, it actually, you can run through a data license pretty quick and determine whether or not it meets your needs.
Yeah. Now, thinking from a commercial or derivative works perspective, I'm wondering how does the presence or absence of a clear license affect the ability to utilize geographic data? Is it something that grinds us to a halt? Is it something that maybe you get caught up in later on of like, oh no, our project stalled? What have you seen?
Um, Again, like with work with Overture that we do, we've drawn a lot of different data sources, come across a lot of different data licenses. If it doesn't meet our needs, or if it doesn't meet our requirements, we move on to the next provider. We've got a lot of data to incorporate into, the address database for Overture, for instance. And we don't necessarily have time to go chasing down every little provider and saying, you know, can we use your data? Your license isn't clear, or if you're asking us permission to use it, to submit a request, that all takes time, right? I mean, you send an email to somebody, and they've got a whole pile of things that they have to attend to, and whether or not they're providing permission for us to use their data might be way down on the list, and might be a couple weeks, a couple months before we hear back from them. And we can't wait that long. We need to get the stuff that we can get into the database and use it. So wherever there's a clear license, it really helps in terms of determining that.
Hmm. And thinking with the increased emphasis on open data and collaborative projects, how do you foresee the evolution of data licensing practices in the geospatial community?
That's a good question. Again, I think people, organizations, I think, are slowly becoming more aware of the need for a clear license. Again, most of them have some sort of license, whether it's clear or whether it's actually just a disclaimer. It's another question. So there's still a lot of education that needs to happen. A while back, last December, I had a meeting with a number of GIS managers from one of the U.S. states, and I went through their data. For instance, there was 58 providers. 57 of them had actually published their data in one form or another to an open data site, but only half of them had some sort of license, and of that half, maybe a third had a clear license. And when I provided this presentation, similar to what we're talking about now, about the need for clear licenses, a lot of them were very surprised and thought, "Oh, I thought I had a clear license," or "I didn't realize that there was a conflict between this license and that license, that I had more than one open data license on my site." So it's a lot of details that I don't think, if you're a one person shop, running your community's GIS and open data site, it's not necessarily something that you might pay attention to. But really, it doesn't take long to take a look to see what your open data site has, to determine if that license is okay or not, and if it's not, to update that license accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we've got kind of the blueprint for what's good, what's bad, maybe where we need to spend some more time for organizations that are starting from scratch, what tools, templates, or guidance would you recommend?
Well, there's a lot of, my blog post being one of them, but there's a lot of material out there online to talk about open data licenses and which license does what. Again, I would suggest going to my blog just to take a look at it, and getting sort of the basics in your head, and then going on from there. All the standard licenses are available there that just require you to copy, change the wording to your community's name or your organization's name, that sort of thing. So it doesn't take a lot of work to do. But again, you have to be clear right from the start, as an organization, how you want to share that data, right? Because that's really going to determine the license that you're going to pick. And once you've settled on what kind of license you want, then there's a standard open data license that will probably fit your needs to do that. So it doesn't take a lot of work. It doesn't take you don't really necessarily need a lawyer. You don't really necessarily need to understand all that legalese. You just need to understand, this is what I want to do, and these are the licenses that we could use to apply to that data.
Okay. And I always like to leave our listeners with a piece of advice from our guests. Looking ahead, what's one thing you hope more organizations start doing when it comes to open data licensing? I know it's a big field to pull from, but what's one thing maybe?
Just having a clear data user license that is not necessarily just a disclaimer. It can include a disclaimer, but it's more than just a disclaimer, right? You're not only protecting your own organization, but you're also making it clear to your users how they can or cannot use the data.
Fantastic. And that brings us to a wrap. Thank you for joining me today, Paul, to talk about open data licensing. Hopefully, you've had a good time with us, and we'll get some people going to the blog rather than maybe just emailing you some questions. Awesome. And that's it for Geographical Thinking today. A huge thank you again to Paul Heersink for taking us on a journey through the wild world of data licenses. If you learned something new or now feel inspired to check the fine print on your favorite data sets, mission accomplished. Remember, when in doubt, check the license. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep thinking geographically.